Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to cover episodes 810 through 812, which will cover manga chapters 845 through 847. As we move into the second act of the Whole Cake Island arc, things take a turn for the worse for the Straw Hats as they come closer to Big Mom. Alright, synopsis. Big Mom has sent her enraged army after Luffy and Nami, and due to Luffy's steadfast dedication to waiting for Sanji in that spot, they now have to fight off and survive the army. Meanwhile, Chopper and Carrot are also captured by Brule, leaving Brook and Pedro as the last remaining team still trying to complete their mission. Alright, so like many of the Whole Cake Island episodes, there are a lot of differences, mostly due to the sheer number of padding and filler they have to include to elongate this arc, unnecessarily I might add. Alright, so to start off, episode 810 begins very differently from what happens in the manga. In the manga, it starts with Sanji and Pudding secretly meeting while Luffy is fighting the enraged army, but the anime puts the focus on Luffy's fight with the army first. In the manga, you only see flashes of Luffy fighting, and the manga doesn't actually return to the fight until Galette captures Nami. The anime, to buy more time, they show us a lot of more fighting and all the fighting, essentially. Episode 810 also adds more scenes of Brule chasing Chopper and Carrot in the anime, and this is something you'll see throughout all three of these episodes, and so we never actually see a lot of this in the manga. Later on in episode 811, we also see extra scenes of Chopper and Carrot fighting Brule and the talking animals, eventually getting overwhelmed by more of those mirror copies of the random wild animals. And then again in episode 812, we get even more filler scenes of them fighting off the mirror copies. In fact, we don't actually see this storyline continue in that the manga has until we actually see them already caught and about to be cooked towards the middle of episode 812. And yeah, it's a lot of fillers because Oda definitely cuts out a lot of this fat. All of these scenes could easily be in the manga, and by implication, it does happen off screen, but Oda saves his time for some of the more relevant things. Another change is when Pudding is talking to Sanji about their situation with the marriage. The manga has her talking over what is happening in the field with Nami and Luffy versus the enraged army, while the anime has her say all this beforehand, and then we cut back to the battle, so they're two separate scenes. Additionally, we see more of the battle as well, when in the manga, it's about this whole section of Luffy and Nami fighting is about half a page long, but obviously we see a lot more of it in the anime. Then it cuts back to Sanji walking up to Pudding and telling her, "Let's get married tomorrow." So that's kind of how it plays out in the manga. Another change, I don't know why they made this change, but the final hit that actually knocks Luffy out, in the anime, for some reason, he gets hit by the same dual punch twice. So in the manga, he just takes that hit once, because once is already devastating enough. But for some reason, the anime has him take that hit twice. It's like the exact same attack. It just happens twice in a row. Except for the dialogue, you could almost think that it's the same animation that they just re-roll twice. It's really bizarre. And then again, at the beginning of episode 812, we see even more padding filler scenes of Sanji just kind of standing at the window, remembering the events of the last two episodes. It's absurd the amount of filler that's packed into Whole Cake Island in the anime. Lastly, we have additionally, the first scene with Mondor having them in his book prison is added as well. In the manga, they're put in this book, however, it's not revealed till a chapter later, and this scene is presumed to have happened off screen. And one interesting about this scene is that you can see a written entry for them on the opposite page, written in really bad Romanized English. From what I can read, it says, under the Straw Hat section, it says that Luffy, Nami, and others have entered a pirate alliance with the Harp Pirates. And then under the Monkey D. Luffy section, it states, Straw Hat Pirates Captain, 500 million berry bounty from Fuchsia Village, has obtained the powers of the Gomu Gomu fruit, enemy of the Big Mom Pirates. And from here, you can get a clear picture of you can't get a clear picture of everything, but essentially it mentions how he picked a fight with Big Mom on Fishman Island and destroyed the factory. And for those crimes of sneaking into Whole Cake Island, defying General Cracker, and destroying the Seducing Woods, he was defeated by the Enraged army and imprisoned. And that's all that we can read there. I could only read the first couple lines of Nami's section, but it reads, Straw Hat Pirate Crew Navigator, bounty 66 million berry bounty from East Blue Kokoyashi Village, former member of the Arlong Pirates, using the, quote, sorcery climb attack, end quote, creates small-scale thunder and rain weather states, and then it cuts off. And what's crazy is just how much intel that the Big Mom Pirates have on them. Like, the fact that they know that Nami's new weapon is called the sorcery climb attack is incredible. I don't think Nami herself ever says that out loud in front of any of them, but they somehow know that name despite it being a relatively new thing. I also find it interesting that this was written in Japanese with romanized English characters. Pretty terribly, I might add, because there are a bunch of misspellings, but it's still fun to read because you don't really get a good view of the words in the manga. So it's pretty cool to actually see this part in the anime in that sense. But from a narrative and storytelling standpoint, I'll get into why I don't like how this is actually this scene actually exists. But anyways, those are most of the differences. So let's get into the episodes themselves. So Luffy begins his fight against the Enraged army, and despite the fact that he's worn down and fighting an unbelievable amount of opponents, along with some of them being incredibly powerful Devil Fruit users, also the regular combatants are pretty strong too, he somehow manages to last a lot longer than I would have ever guessed, even for Luffy. During this fight, we get to see the abilities of some of the more prominent members of the Charlotte family, like Opera, who we could have guessed that his powers are like cream-based. And we learn that he has the Kuri Kuri no Mi, or cream fruit, and Kuri being the first part of the word kurimu, or cream in Japanese with the Japanese accent. His fruit is confirmed to be a paramecia and not a logia type, similar to Gaudino's Dorodoro fruit with his wax powers and stuff like that. But one weird property of this power set is the fact that it can somehow superheat itself to the point where it can set the cream on fire, and anything caught in the cream also on fire. And for the longest time, I thought that was the weirdest thing ever, until someone, I can't remember if it was like a YouTuber or a Reddit post that pointed it out, that this is probably another reference to creme brulee, where you often use a blowtorch to superheat custard cream to make a hard shell. And when I saw it from that perspective, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Now, we also get to see Bobbin's hypnosis ability, which is something we don't see in the manga for quite a while, actually. Also, Bobbin is not a Charlotte member, actually. He's just part of the crew, probably as part of another crew that assimilated into Big Mom's bigger crew, similar to what happened with Bedge and the Fire Tank Pirates. And yeah, just when Luffy was about to be in trouble, Nami comes back to help him out. And now in the manga, because we never saw this, it's never revealed whether Nami even actually left Luffy's side, which again, I'm not a fan of him or her leaving him, even if it was Luffy and King Bomb that forced her to. And I gotta say, Nami is amazing in basically all of Whole Cake Island, but also particularly this battle. She just comes in clutch time and time again. And I also love how King Bomb is basically considered part of Luffy's group now in the eyes of the Big Mom Pirates, that he's betrayed them, and he's just like vehemently trying to deny that he's being forced into this, like he is a hostage. And it's kind of funny how he's just kind of caught in between. It's really funny just seeing him like panic every time they just consider him one of the Straw Hats. After some fighting, we get to the meat of this episode, which is the secret conversation between Sanji and Pudding. After the dinner, where she explains how it was her plan to get them into Whole Cake Island to help retrieve Sanji, to which she apologizes for, Sanji explains that even if she had succeeded, he had no plans to meet up with them on the coast due to the explosive wristbands and the fact that in order to actually escape, they would need to go through Big Mom, which at this point in time seems like an impossibility. Sanji tells Pudding about his abusive family and what they're capable of, and this is where you see why Sanji feels so helpless. The way he sees it is he's kind of on his own. His family hates him, and likewise he hates them. His nakama will be killed in time, and his friends and family back on the Baratie are all being threatened. He has nowhere to turn, and there's no help coming for him. And he feels isolated and alone. At least that's what he believes. And it's kind of sad seeing Sanji speaking so depressingly and frankly kind of pathetically. He's given up, and even when half of his crew are here on the island right now to save him, he doesn't believe they can succeed, so he doesn't even try, which I think we can sympathize with given just how strong Big Mom is. But it's more so just the way Sanji views himself, and I'll get into this a little bit later. But yeah, like Big Mom, just her physical strength, but is already scary enough. But the power and influence she wields is probably even more scary. Sanji's plan is to request Big Mom to let his nakama go in exchange for accepting this marriage, which I mean, he's not really in a position to bargain, so I don't really know how he's going to get her to agree to that, but it's a very nice sentiment. Pudding is very sweet in considering Sanji's feelings and doesn't want, to be an imposition to the point where Sanji commits to her, being his like salvation at this point with no other place to go, and tells her, let's get married. The thing about this whole thing is that since I knew that Sanji was not going to end up marrying her, and the fact that she is one of Big Mom's kids, there has to be a catch. Like, this is unfolding almost too perfectly for Sanji in regards to at least the marriage. She's like too perfect to be true. And I remember at the time when I was reading that, I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop when she or Big Mom would reveal some sort of twist, because as we've seen with this arc, the theme is that the sweetest things all have some dark twist or underbelly to them. And as much as I liked Pudding, like I had to think that there something had to be there. But anyways, Luffy and Nami put up an incredibly good fight, considering just the sheer power and numbers that they were facing. But eventually, it does overwhelm them, but not before they've taken out hundreds of soldiers and fighters. Nami especially is crazy during this fight by utilizing Big Mom's lightning clouds created by Zeus to take down the vast majority of sort of the simple chess soldiers. But eventually she is caught by Galette using her Devil Fruit ability, which at the time we don't know what it is, but it's some form of a liquid jelly that she binds Nami's hands with and is able to control the substance like almost telepathically. It's not until volume 91 in the SBS that we found out that this is actually the Bata Bata no Mi, or butter fruit. Bata is just the word butter with a Japanese accent. And it's actually where Berter from the Ginyu Force in Dragon Ball Z also comes from too. If you haven't noticed, all the Ginyu Force members are named after dairy products, and Berter is Bata. So yeah, he's butter. Raccoon is, I believe, ricotta cheese. Goldo is also some form of cheese. Ginyu is Japanese for milk, gyunyu. And then jis is cheese. So yeah, just a little bit of fun wordplay there. And I honestly, I think that's where also Oda gets a lot of his naming conventions from too, is because Toriyama was so, used to using a lot of these sort of wordplay with food. I think Oda also follows in his mentor's footsteps in that regard. But I feel like the animation at Toei had no idea this substance was butter, because the way the anime depicts the color, it's very clear and looks nothing like butter. But I also feel like they could have inferred that, given that they did know that she was the Minister of Butter, which was revealed to us like 3 chapters prior to the events of this episode. So I don't understand the confusion, whether Oda had approved this or if they just didn't have any idea what her fruit actually was. Because it's like this grayish clear fruit or cream. It looks nothing like butter. And even if you wanted to say, oh, maybe it's like melted butter, it still doesn't look anything like butter. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like they just didn't know what the hell it was. But anyways, seeing all of her family members have these very specific and coordinated Devil Fruit abilities, again, inherently shows just how powerful and vast Big Mom's forces are. Like, can you imagine, like, to be able to not just find but also acquire all these devil fruit powers is incredible. That she can match them up with, her kids. She basically went out with the sole purpose of finding all these food-related devil fruits and either had the power or resources to actually get them. And it's not something you immediately think about, but when you really do kind of sit down to think about like the logistics of Big Mom finding all these very specific devil fruits, it kind of boggles your mind because like we see devil fruits like left and right now, but they're still incredibly rare and valuable. And the world of One Piece is very vast and also isolated. Like they're all islands in like big, a big world of water. Unlike our world where we have like huge continents, One Piece's world is like all these little tiny islands just scattered all over the place. And they're not easily like, you can't really easily get to them, whether it's through the Grand Line, the Calm Belt, through each of the East, or it's through the Blues, and then over the Red Line. Like there's just so many barriers to traversing the world that a Big Mom having all these fruits is incredible to me, at least. Once Nami is captured, King Bomb gets cruelly cut in half very slowly to increase his torture with a move called the Slow Ballad by Amande, living up to her Kyujin or Demon Lady name. And Luffy is the last one still fighting, but now the big guns of the Charlotte family begin to join in the fight after realizing that they've underestimated them, as Opera and Mondor face Luffy at the same time. And this is where we are introduced to Mondor's Devil Fruit ability, which is really unique and pretty cool. He controls books, and he can seemingly levitate them to stand on and float in the air. But more crazily, he can suck people into what he calls the world of books. And what's weird though is I never fully understood how this devil fruit power actually manifests, because it looks like he's getting sucked up into the book, but when you see him, he's still in the physical world, but is in some sort of a hypnosis where he thinks he's in some other place. But it's not in his head either, because the things in the books are physically hitting him and moving him. And you see that reflected in the real world. The anime does add a lot of aspects to the books and this power that we don't see in the manga, but I just don't think Oda illustrated what this fruit's powers are very clearly, because it's not entirely clear in the manga or the anime. Now, as you can imagine, the name of this fruit is the Buku Buku no Mi, or the book fruit. This is actually a devil fruit that we don't learn the name of until we hear about it in an SBS, in the volume 90 SBS actually. With Luffy and Nami down and now captured, about to be taken to Big Mom, they take Lola's Big Mom Vivre card away from Nami, believing that the Straw Hats killed her and stole it. However, Luffy is doing everything in his power to remain in that spot, just grabbing at the grass to wait for Sanji, but is knocked out and then taken away. And during all this, Sanji meets with Big Mom to make the deal that he had told Pudding about, that he will willingly marry Pudding on the condition that Big Mom lets his nakama go free, to which she surprisingly agrees to pretty easily. But again, when it comes to someone like Big Mom, I have my doubts whether she will actually follow through on this and keep her end of the deal, especially when you hear the long list of slights that Luffy has committed against her up till now. But nonetheless, it makes Sanji very happy to hear that. And one little detail I really like about this scene, though, is that if you pay attention to Napoleon, her hat, the hat homie on her head, it mimics her facial expressions. And this isn't actually something I noticed until a few times after reading. I definitely didn't notice the first time I read this in the manga, nor did I even notice this the first time I saw it in the anime episodes. It was only upon like multiple rewatches that I actually looked at Napoleon. I was like, oh, he's mimicking Big Mom's facial expressions. Now, one thing about this scene is it also really highlights one of Sanji's major character traits, or flaws, depending on how you look at it, that we've seen throughout the entire series ever since his introduction, and that is his constant willingness to sacrifice himself for the sake of others. And now we can really see the source of that it's not so much from a place of like altruism and kindness, But I mean, of course, Sanji has a great deal of both, and there is some aspect of his altruism and kindness that goes with that. But like Robin before Enies Lobby, Sanji just does not value his life as highly as he should. Sanji is an incredibly complex character because he is confident, capable, and extremely strong, but deep down he has this sort of immense amount of self-worth issues and self-doubt. We've touched upon this throughout this entire series, but now we know exactly where it comes from. He has always been incredibly willing to just throw his life away in service of others, almost like it's expendable. And we now know it comes from his traumatic upbringing and constantly being told that his life is worthless. He's a worthless failure. And yet again, he is essentially casting aside his own wants, happiness, and life for the sake of others. Right from the beginning, when we're introduced to Sanji, he was willing to die for Zeph and the Baratie against Pearl and Krieg. And then again on Drum, he sacrifices his life during the avalanche to get Luffy and Nami to safety. And then again on Skypiea, he sacrificed himself against Enel to buy time for Usopp and Nami to escape when they were stuck on the Arc Maxim. And then again on Thriller Bark, he was just as willing to die for Luffy against Kuma, and he would have if Zoro hadn't stopped him. And then we got that nothing happened moment. And then again later on in Punk Hazard, he went back for Tashigi and the G5 guys to fight Virgo in the Punk Hazard laboratory during the poison gas attack. He actually ran towards the poison, not knowing whether he could make it back or not. And in any case, there are many moments, big and small, where Sanji is constantly valuing others' lives over his own with almost reckless abandon. This all stems from his father, and my hope for this arc was that we would finally see some growth past that, and that this would be sort of the turning point for Sanji, where he would realize that his life has so much value to others, and that this sort of destructive self-sacrificing would begin to heal, and that he would actually start to kind of turn more so into someone that does value his life. Like I hope that he, and I know that he will still go out of his way to protect others, but I want him to sort of grow past to a point where he actually values his life just as much as the people he saves. And because he just, the way he goes about it is almost like, my life doesn't matter. If I can use my life to just save someone else, then so be it. And I don't know that that's the best outlook in life, even if you have the power to save others. And so that was one thing I was excited for this arc as I was reading it. And once we saw that flashback happen, I hope that he would somehow get some closure and be able to see himself differently. And so that's one reason why I love the Whole Cake Island arc so much, is because we get to finally kind of dive into that sort of destructive quality that Sanji has displayed throughout the entire series, really. Now from there, Luffy and Nami are locked up inside a book using Mondor's powers, which again, this power is such a really cool and unique power set. The thing about this scene, though, is that the manga actually sets this book prison up beforehand by showing us other beings imprisoned, which we will get to, but I think this scene was ultimately unnecessary and kind of undercut the real reveal of them being in one of these books. The scene that actually takes place is the one directly after it in the treasure room with Baron Tamago and our first introduction to the next sweet general, Smoothie. Now, she is this incredibly tall woman that seems to have some kind of power to wring out a person and drink their juices, which sounds awful and gross. And she is the 14th daughter with a 932 million berry bounty, which is significantly higher than even Cracker's 832. And her name is obviously referring to smoothie drinks, which makes sense with her powers. However, we don't really learn much about her fruit or what it's called in the story. Now, this part that I'm about to talk might be spoilers, but I'm going to tell you that Smoothie is probably the most underutilized character in the story for how much she's built up. And I'm going to save you the disappointment we all had reading this as it was being released, because she ultimately serves a very small role in this arc and series thus far. and it doesn't look like she's going to do very much, if at all, at any point, at any time soon. It's kind of crazy. And I wouldn't put it past Oda to circle back around and give some incredibly satisfying role for Smoothie. But within the context of the Whole Cake Island arc, Smoothie is an incredibly large nothing burger. Her fruit name isn't even revealed till an SBS in volume 89, where it's revealed to be called the Shibo Shibo no Mi, or the ring fruit. And that's ring in terms of like wringing a towel dry, like when you twist it to get the water out, not ring like a finger ring or anything like that. Shibo is just short for the word shiboru, which means to wring something out in Japanese. And because of this lack of her character in this arc, a fan actually asked about Smoothie, and here was Oda's response in that SBS. Quote, "In the end, I wasn't able to draw why that page was relevant in this arc, but Smoothie ate the Shibo Shibo no Mi and became the dehydration human. She can squeeze the juice out of her enemies and slice them with her sword to put out all of the water content to completely dry them out. The water she steals can be stored in her own body, causing her to increase in size. She can also shoot the water out as an attack, and she's strong," end quote. So she kind of reminds me at least a little bit like Crocodile, who can like dehydrate people. But unlike Crocodile, she can actually use the hydration, I guess you can say, to make herself stronger, which is an interesting power set when you think about it, because she can actually, I don't know if it's infinite, but she can constantly make herself stronger and stronger and stronger. Kind of like how, Big Mom's also, her soul fruit, I would imagine works the same way, where she can constantly like take the powers of souls and inject them into her. Also kind of like Moria. Moria obviously had a limit to how many shadows he can actually, absorb. But yeah, I mean, Moria could also do the same thing with shadows. And it's interesting that Smoothie can just constantly, intake hydration from her victims and then add them to her own strength and size, which, again, yeah, I can imagine why she's so strong. Additionally, in the Vivaricard visual dictionary, Smoothie's card explains that Oda also had toyed with the idea of calling her fruit the Kaju no Mi, or the fruit, or the Shiru no Mi, which is juice fruit, but ultimately settled on Shibo no Mi. Although, can you imagine this fruit being called the fruit for English speakers? Like in Japanese, Kaju no Mi, it makes sense, but translated into English, it'd just be fruit, which I wish it was named that, because it would be so funny to constantly call that fruit. But yeah, that's just a funny little tidbit of information that we got. Now, this does seem like one of those rare times where Oda introduces something and for whatever reason doesn't actually pay it off even slightly. And I found it very weird, but the way I kind of see it is that after Dressrosa, either Oda himself or his editors were intentionally trying to reduce the length and complexity of Whole Cake Island, which is why you see so many things kind of occur off screen in the manga. And to their credit, the manga version of Whole Cake Island does in fact flow and is paced a lot better than Dressrosa ever was. But because the anime not only puts all that stuff back, and they add their own filler on top of that stuff they add back, the pacing for the Whole Cake Island anime is just a freaking mess and just downright torture. Whole Cake Island, to watch in the anime, is an awful experience. It's almost as bad as Dressrosa. I wouldn't say it's quite as bad, but it is bad. It's really hard to get through Whole Cake Island in the anime, and I can understand why some people just drop the anime altogether during or after Whole Cake Island, because it is brutal. Even during these rewatches, like where I know what's going to happen, I don't have to wait, it's still hard because there's just so much unnecessary things and repetition. The repetition is probably the worst part about it. Just seeing so many things just being constantly repeated, or we're seeing flashbacks of things we saw 5 minutes ago. It's just really weird and just so unpleasant to watch. But anyways, Baron Tamago goes on to explain to us what we already know about the poneglyphs, but one new piece of information is that the reason Pedro was actually here 5 years ago was that he was there to steal the poneglyphs from Big Mom and was caught but spared due to Pecom's asking for mercy. And this scene is honestly just really clunky exposition for us, the audience, and for Brook to learn this information, because in universe, there's no reason Tamago would need to say this to someone like Smoothie when she herself says she already knows all this information. But anyways, Brook, now knowing this information, hatches a plan for Pedro to bait, to be bait for them all to get away from the treasure room so that Brook can sneak in and get the rubbing of the rope poneglyph. And I love how Pedro was already thinking the same thing, because otherwise that is an insane ask for someone to do, to become bait against one of Big Mom's generals and the entire squad of those people. Now after this, we finally get to the canon scene from the manga of what happened with Chopper and Carrot in the mirror world, where they've been caught by Brule and are about to be boiled in some kind of stew, which plays into Brule's sort of fairy tale evil witch aesthetic. But this seems to be part of Chopper's plan, as he kind of hints that he has some sort of a plan to shrink back down so that he can get out of his chains. And that's something I wish that Oda would actually utilize more, is Chopper's ability to change sizes, because he used it a lot when he was first introduced. He would dodge attacks by going into heavy point and then shrinking back down to brain point, or jumping with his athleticism and agility with his walk point. I loved seeing him just flip between the different forms, and it was just so much more unique and creative the way Oda would utilize Chopper's ability to transform. Now it's just he's always in Kung Fu point or Monster point, and that's it. That's all he does. And it's kind of sad that Chopper doesn't use his transformations more readily, considering he has so many of them. But I like that they reintroduced this aspect of Chopper. He knows that if he gets chained up as in his heavy point, that he can shrink down and all those chains would become useless. And I like that aspect of it. So I'm glad to see that being used again. But this then moves to a scene where Big Mom displays her book collection of unique beings to the Vinsmokes. And the first thing she pulls up is one of a page with the manticores from Impel Down that somehow escaped when Blackbeard and Luffy went wild in it. And these are the same manticores that would mimic things that the inmates would have said over the years, like beef stew, and for some reason Ichigo panties, like strawberry panties. But she also has what she calls a unicorn, but it frankly looks like just a zebra with some sort of a horn drilled into his head. In another section of the book, you can see something called the Kinoko Bito, which translated means mushroom people. Kinoko is mushroom in Japanese, and Bito or Hito means person or people. That was a really random one. But on the next page next to it, you can see a Doskoi Panda. Now, Doskoi Panda is the name of a fictional clothing brand in the world of One Piece. And it even has two knockoff brands within the universe as well. One called Doskoi Panda, where the I is replaced by a 1. And then there's another one called Cyber Panda, which you actually saw Shoujo from Cricket's salvage team, one of the monkeys, could be seen wearing a Cyber Panda shirt during the Jaya arc. And what surprised me was that a Doskoi Panda was a real living creature in the world of One Piece, and it looks like the brand was based off of that animal, which is interesting to see, like a sumo panda just roaming around the world of One Piece. But I thought that was really funny. She also mentions she caught a centaur from Punk Hazard, which technically were just Law mashing people together using his fruits, as well as a griffin from the South Blue, which we've never actually seen. So this is a whole new thing. But the truly horrifying part about this ability is that all these creatures and even people don't age while in the book, so they are essentially trapped in there forever. And one interesting moment from this interaction is when Judge asks, despite all these variety of people, races, and creatures, he's yet to see a giant in Whole Cake Island, to which Big Mom gets noticeably irritated, but holds her tongue, playing it off like it's just a coincidence that they've yet to see one. but clearly there's some history here with why there aren't any giants. And my guess is that, or at least my guess at the time, was that Big Mom herself was a giant or something, and she has some history with them that we're not privy to yet. At least that was most people's theories at the time, considering her large ass size. Like, she's not as big as a legit giant like Dory or Broggy or Orimo and Kashi, but she does seem to be different in the sense that she may be like half giant or something. And I honestly don't remember like what really I thought about this at the time. And yeah, it'd be kind of hard for me to completely speculate like what I was actually thinking, but I do remember thinking that, yeah, she must have been like half giant or something. But it's here that Big Mom is informed of Luffy and Nami's capture and leaves to deal with that. And this next scene is supposed to be the true moment we realize that Luffy and Nami have also been imprisoned in one of these books, unlike how the anime showed us first how they were imprisoned. But I feel like it was better to show us this sort of messed up way that Big Mom collects and imprisons all these beings and people to build up the dread and mystery of what happens to Nami and Luffy, and kind of at least to allow us some time to let our imaginations kind of run wild with it for just a little bit, and then reveal that they're also in one of these books. Also, this scene, Toei again decides to go way overboard with the fan service when there wasn't even any fan service in the manga to begin with. The moment I'm talking about is when Nami demands to be able to take a shower because she's too sticky from all the syrup rain. But the anime decides to go to a close-up of her cleavage and then another close-up on her thighs and her ass. For some reason, even though the manga, this scene is just a wide shot of both of them in the cell, the prison cell within the book, with no hint of fan service from Oda. This is like a moment where Toei just added in just blatant fan service for no reason, and it's so distracting and it's so unnecessary. Again, they will use any excuse to add fan service and to pad time. But yeah, this is where Big Mom speaks to Luffy once again for the first time since Fishman Island, but she still only does it over the Dendemushi. They have yet to meet face to face, and I kind of understand it from Big Mom's perspective, like viewing Luffy as more of an annoyance than an actual threat, considering how it appears that he's underestimated her strength since he didn't even bring his whole crew. I also even thought at this moment Luffy probably isn't ready to face Big Mom and take her down, considering how much he struggled with Cracker, and there are two other more powerful sweet generals, and Perospero, who is probably her eldest son. She has to contend with him as well. And even before we even get to Big Mom herself, like Big Mom is a Yonko, and thus far the only other Yonko we've seen in action is Whitebeard, and that dude took on several armies and leveled an entire island of Marines by himself. Like, the power difference in the Yonko between them, the Shibukai, and like a normal pirate is just insane. But with the element of secrecy gone, Luffy challenges her straight up. And you have to give Luffy credit for the confidence and fearlessness he has, despite the dire situation he's in. Like, he is bound and trapped with only half of his crew and not even really knowing what kind of a situation he's actually in. But thankfully, he's still got Brook and Pedro around, and seemingly Chopper, despite his capture, looks like he has a plan to escape as well. And we will see how Luffy manages to get out of this one. But one thing I loved about Whole Cake Island as a story is just how threatening Big Mom is. Unlike Doflamingo or any other arc villain so far in the post-time skip era, I just couldn't imagine how Luffy was going to beat her, which is honestly crazy. And yeah, it built up this sort of anticipation, dread, suspense, just seeing like, how is Luffy going to get out of this? Because I honestly didn't think that he was going to win a fight. And it just, I couldn't see it. She's too strong, and he's just not strong enough right now. And even if he got like a power boost, another gear or something like that, I just still couldn't see him beating her. And so, yeah, they created a very interesting story to read that it's an experience that I hadn't really felt in a long time in One Piece. Probably not since, the admiral showed up, with both Aokiji and Kizaru, but they weren't like main villains in any of the arcs. Like Big Mom is the main villain of this arc. Luffy will eventually have to take him on. Whereas the other two, with Aokiji and Kizaru, he still had the ability to run away. Same with Kuma. And, Kuma obviously ended up not actually taking him on, but at least in Thriller Bark, he was a legitimate threat. And they somehow managed to get away from that. But even then, he was not the main villain of that arc. He just kind of like showed up. But this is the first time where it's like, all right, this is someone Luffy will have to go through, but I just cannot imagine a scenario where he actually gets through her. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But yeah, we'll get into more of that on the next episode. So, and if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. It really makes me happy and it helps out. Also, yeah, feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy reading those as well, both negative and positive. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast for updates when I post new episodes. See some pictures of my manga collection and card collection. And also, thank you, as always, for taking the time out to listen to my podcast. Small spoiler section, but if you're not interested in that, stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye! Alrighty, so spoiler section. This episode's kind of getting long, so I'm going to try and keep this a little shorter than my usual ramblings. But the first thing I kind of wanted to mention is when you watch these scenes with Pudding, knowing the fact that she betrays Sanji and is secretly working against him, and just straight up lying to his face in these moments, it makes you realize what an incredible liar and actress she is. It's crazy just watching these scenes, knowing that she is just bold-faced lying to Sanji in this moment. And again, it just makes when Sanji overhears her and you see him crying in the rain on the balcony, it makes that scene hit that much harder. But yeah, it's interesting rewatching these, knowing that she is lying to him. And just how convincing she is. And yeah, but at the same time though, based on how the fact that Pudding does actually fall kind of in love with Sanji by the end of this arc, you kind of almost sense that some of that may actually be true. When you really think about it. And we'll definitely dive more into that when that part of this arc actually happens. But I just couldn't help but think to myself, my God, she is insanely good at lying. When you look at that part, especially when they're having that secret conversation. And the other thing I kind of wanted to mention was, when it comes to the devil fruits and how Big Mom tracked all those different fruits down, we actually did kind of get to see how she got some of these fruits fairly recently with with both versions of the God Valley incident, both Kuma's version and Rock's version, and just her going after these fruits. And there's one panel where you read how she mentions, oh, this fruit would be good for katakuri, or this fruit would be good for oven. And you can see little katakuri and little oven just sitting next to her younger self. And then she goes to God Valley and takes a few of the fruits and all of that. So yeah, I do find that interesting. So yeah, she definitely spent a lot of her life, especially during her time with the Rocks Pirates, I'm sure, collecting all these powerful devil fruits for her kids. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to mention is Smoothie. Again, I know I talked about it in the non-spoiler section about how useless Smoothie is to the story. And what's crazy is she had another chance to kind of come back and do something during Wano, because she shows up in Wano. But again, Oda just kind of wastes her and keeps her on the boat, not doing a damn thing, and only really having Peros show up for the final war. It's just does Oda just not know what to do with Smoothie, or does he not like Smoothie? It's really bizarre how little I don't know, fanfare and screen time Smoothie gets. Like, she's introduced as like one of these big guys and doesn't do anything with her. You know, we got to see Cracker, we got to see Perispero, and then obviously Katakuri at the end of this arc is kind of the main villain. And it's just weird. That'd be like with Kaido, you have King, Queen, and Jack, and he just chose not to do anything with Queen. It's just like, or you know, or you with the CP9, you have like Kaku, Lucci, or not Lucci, but yeah, you know, Kaku, Lucci, Jabra, and like he decided not to do anything with Jabra. Like he just like introduced this really cool, you know, wolf guy, and then he just doesn't do anything. And so yeah, it's just really bizarre how Big Mom has this one of her main, like potentially her third or second most powerful fighter, and doesn't do anything with her. Yeah, I just find the whole Smoothie thing just really weird. It's almost like it's one of those really rare instances where Oda introduces something, it just doesn't know what to do with it. You know, usually even if at the time it's like not used or seemingly insignificant, he comes back and circles around and does something with them. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of time for Smoothie to come back and do something. And I honestly think the way with Katakuri, I think Katakuri will actually help Luffy out, to be honest. Like, I honestly think that Katakuri will come back as a potential ally to Luffy at some point, especially if Big Mom is in fact either incapacitated or dead after Wano. We still don't really know whether both Big Mom and Kaido are actually dead when as they're launched into the magma of that Wano volcano. But yeah, it'll be interesting. Anyways, that's really all I wanted to talk about. So thanks for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode. See ya.